Welcome to Stitchery Stories, where textile artists share their life in fabric and thread, inspiration, techniques, disasters and delights. And I'm Susan Reeks, enthusiastic embroiderer and textile art dabbler who also loves podcasting. So take a break and enjoy our light-hearted chat, and please share with your friends so they can enjoy it too.
Hey, Happy New Year! Well, before I introduce my lovely guest today, I just wanted to do a couple of things, just take a couple of quick minutes. Firstly, to say hello and welcome to any new listeners and new people in my world. No matter where you've found me, you've been interested enough to follow along and join in, and for that I really appreciate and thank you. And thank you also for everyone who shares about Stitchery Stories, and that's always very much appreciated. That's how we grow, isn't it? Anyway, as we start a new year, I thought this was a good time to give a quick update from me about what I was working on and what has got me excited. Don't worry, only a minute or so. I'm busy working towards the launch of the next phase of my online business journey, my online course and mentoring business, supporting in particular, yes, you've guessed it, textile artists, embroidery artists, those crafty and creative small businesses. For me, it's that sweet spot where I can bring together my 10 years plus of online business experience, my deep love of supporting others to thrive, my 25 years plus, is it that long, technology training and mentoring career, and of course, my lifelong love of textile art. So for me to be able to bring all this together it's really exciting. I am very excited about this. I have talked about this a bit in the past, but it's happening. 2021. Here we go. When I launched this podcast back in 2017, it was as a hobby really, to support my podcast services business. But as the episodes and years have passed by, it's shown me that there is a community out there on the internet who I'm uniquely placed to support. And the events of the last year, of course, has really brought that realisation into sharp focus for me. And so, well, here I am. But don't worry, Stitchery Stories will continue in the format that you all love. It will be the centre of my business, and I hope you continue to listen and share with your stitchy friends. I'll be adding things, so I'll be adding in other formats, so I won't be disrupting this podcast at all. I will be adding in other formats to support and share information around online business and online course creation and related stuff like that. So for those of you who are running a business, this is the extra information I'll be adding in if you'd care to follow along. I'll be offering courses for sale and mentoring services, and perhaps a group for those of you who would like to work through your business challenges with others who are walking the same path. So the first specific thing that I'd like to announce is my planned Instagram Live series, Stitchery Bizwiz Stories. And I mentioned about this just before Christmas, but I will be chatting about various business challenges and online stuff. There'll be a mixture of sometimes just me, and other times I will invite guests to join me. And so we'll have a live chat about what's working in their creative business. I've made a deadline for myself, so the first one, yikes, will be Wednesday the 20th of January at 11 a.m. UK time, and don't worry, it will be available to watch for 24 hours because they go into Instagram stories, and also I'll put it on IGTV, and well, frankly, I'll also be repurposing it, the video, and I'll put it into blog posts and maybe YouTube and all that kind of stuff, all right? Anyway, that's the first of my own announcements. Of course, there will be more as I work through changes and launch and get this phase of my business up and running. So there we are. Anyway, enough from me, and let me hand over to this week's episode, which I'm sure you'll all really enjoy. Bye. Hello, and welcome today to our lovely guest, Cindy Jackson. Hi, Cindy.
Hi, Sue.
It's lovely to speak to you today.
I'm looking forward to speaking to you.
Yay. Right. So I've got a bio here from Cindy. So Cindy Jackson is a freelance embroiderer, designer and tutor. An award-winning textile artist, she finds inspiration in the remarkable potential of embroidery, experimenting with the unusual while preserving a commitment to technique. As an independent researcher, her focus is on professional Tudor embroiderers and the impact of their craft on the material culture of early modern England. Her published articles combine documentary analysis with careful practical investigation of 16th century artifacts, and Cindy lives and works in Ottawa, Canada. You can find Cindy on her website and also on Instagram and Facebook, and all of Cindy's links and some images are all on her episode on stitcherystories.com. So welcome again, Cindy.
Thank you, Sue. It's nice to be here with you.
And we're just wrapping up for the year. So, Cindy, you are the final interview for 2020. How about that?
Just in under the wire.
Yes, certainly are. Right then. So, Cindy, how about before we get started into the nitty-gritty detail of your stitchery story, would you like to share with us what are you working on and what's got you excited?
Oh, I'm working on a lot of different things. Most of all, I'm really excited about learning to teach online. It's been a journey, something I didn't think I'd ever really do.
Yeah,
but I've been loving it, actually.
That's really great to hear. We actually had conversations earlier on this year, and it was something that you were like, well, don't know if I really want to do the online thing, but here you are. And I think you and a lot of other embroidery artists and textile artists have gone on that rather rapid journey over the summer as well.
I think they have, and I think it's been very good for the art of embroidery. It seems to have been breathed new life into it. So a lot of people are picking up a needle and spending a lot of time doing their own artwork.
Yeah, I think there's two sides to it, isn't there? I think a lot more people have found themselves with more time in some respects, depending on what their situation was. So they've had more time to pick a needle up again, or finally go, oh, do you know what? I've always fancied having a go, and of having a go. And lots of people have said to me, and I've seen it a lot online, that people have found it so therapeutic to have a craft to focus on rather than all of the turmoil that's going on, around the world.
Absolutely.
And do you find that, Cindy?
It's absolutely saved me this summer and the winter. It started way back in March, and it was quite snowy here.
Yeah.
And we weren't able to go out anyway so much. Well, we could have if you're a snow person.
Yeah.
But I'm not. I go for my morning walks, and that's about it.
Yeah.
And I had a studio built in the basement, and it just got finished in December last year.
Right.
And I was so fortunate to have it finished and be able to just spend, the past 9 months down there.
Yeah.
And it's been fabulous. I don't get a whole lot of sunshine, very small windows. But the lighting down there is fabulous. And I just love to wake up in the morning, go straight down there and spend all my day down there just being creative.
Oh, fabulous. Go and hide in your studio. Oh, that's brilliant. That is. Yeah, yeah. So, that'll have been an absolute godsend to you this year then, Cindy, definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the other side of it as well is people having more time to do it and a resurged interest, I think. And then because so many artists have really had to up their online game, then they are more visible and more accessible to more people because of that.
I never thought I'd be on Facebook, but I think I started it. Think about in April, I finally decided that I needed to have something to do every day in order to get up and get through this.
Yeah.
I thought, well, every day I'm going to get up and I'm going to do a post on Facebook. And it doesn't matter what it is. It has to be embroidery related, but I was going to do that. And I managed to do it right up until August.
Wow.
Just anything. I would put anything on there. Past work, new work, needlework tools, anything, just little interest bits.
And I think that's what people like to see, though. And I mean, that's one thing I think that, well, maybe I'm just speaking for everybody here or speaking just for myself. Consistency of keeping going is, I think, possibly one of the biggest challenges that we have with social media. Sometimes it can feel like a beast that you've got to keep feeding, as it were.
Yes, indeed. There were mornings when I'm going, Well, I'm not quite sure. I'll have to find something, but I did. I did.
Brilliant. And did you find that the consistency helped you attract an audience and grow an audience, Cindy?
I sure did. I got an awful lot of followers pretty much right away.
Yeah.
It hasn't, grown too much since then because I haven't been very consistent lately. But I think after Christmas and I get started again, I will ramp up again and start putting more on.
Yeah, it definitely, the consistency side of things definitely helps. Anyway, before we start rambling on with my favourite subject of online marketing and online things, let's go back to the embroidery. What you're working on there and what you're getting excited about. Now, so you're online teaching, so you've put some classes together. Are you currently, have you just finished one, if I remember rightly?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
And I started this because when at the beginning of the year, I thought this was going to be my best teaching year ever. And I was going to the States, I was going to the east of Canada, and I was going to Australia this year. And of course, everything was canceled. So I had all these kits all ready to go. And I thought, well, what can I do?
Yeah.
So I just contacted all the people that had signed up for the class and said, if you'd like to, I'll put it online and we can make an adventure of it.
Yeah.
And it worked out beautifully.
That's fabulous. So you've just finished one. So since it's worked out beautifully, have you got plans to do it again?
Oh yes, actually the same class that I taught.
Yeah,
I'm teaching again in January because there was quite a call for it.
Yeah,
and then I have another class that I teach through the Embroiderers Guild of America.
Yeah,
they have an online thing, and I've got I think 86 students in that class.
Wow,
it's a different kind of class. It's not got a Zoom element to it.
Yeah,
but I was overwhelmed with the number of students that signed up. And then after that, I did a series of scientific instruments from Tudor times. And I started with the compass, and now I've just finished the armillary sphere, and then there's an astrolabe. And the armillary sphere is just being done on the classes. I'm just finishing up the instructions and the videos. And that'll be probably in March next year.
Right. Yeah. So now they look like really quite a challenging concept, especially, and it's like the compass has got a raised arrow, hasn't it? And the astrolabe, I've said it wrong, but the round curvy thing. That's curves everywhere. That looks quite a challenge as well. Interesting subject though. I've never seen anything like that.
Well, when I do my research, I look at all these different embroideries, and this one was kind of inspired by some embroidered armillary spheres and compasses on a hat that I saw that was embroidered in the 16th century.
Yeah.
So that's where I started there, and it just kind of grew from there. I like to do things in threes.
Yeah. Three is a nice number, isn't it? It's kind of like a magic number as well as three. Yeah, threes is a good thing for a series. Now then, so we've got all sorts of interesting things going on there. But how did you first get interested in embroidery and textile art? And then kind of moving into, how did somebody who's living in Ottawa in Canada get interested in English Tudor embroidery from the 16th century? So that's question 2 out of the first bit of how did you get involved in all of this?
Oh, well, it's a long story, but let's see how short I can make it.
In a nutshell.
I really liked to be alone when I was a kid, and I liked to do a lot of craft work. Yeah. My dad was a silversmith and industrial arts teacher, which is wood shop and metal shop. And he was always doing something around the house, and I was always kind of underfoot. So, and it was the same with my grandmother. If I was going to be with her, I had to be cutting quilt squares or something, shapes for quilting, or folding gauze bandages, for the Red Cross. I had to be doing something.
Yeah.
When I was going through high school, I was always knitting or doing craft work of some kind, a little bit of embroidery. And then when I finished school, high school, I wasn't cut out to be a university kind of kid. Mm-hmm. I didn't look forward to that at all. And my aunt found a cutting in the Ottawa Citizen, the newspaper, in 1972. So it's a long time ago. And it was the centenary of the Royal School of Needlework.
Yeah.
And it was just a little paragraph, and she cut it out and she sent it to me. I lived in Toronto at the time. And I thought, well, maybe I could do that. And so when I went to look at universities with the rest of the class, I went to one of the university's libraries and looked up the Royal School of Needlework in the London telephone books. I sent them a letter, and they wrote back and said, oh, well, thank you very much, but there's no space for you this year. We've already got our apprentices.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, never say die.
Yeah.
I need some money anyway, so I'll work for a year and then I'll apply again.
Mm-hmm.
So I did. And that's when I went to the Royal School of Needlework.
Fabulous.
A long time ago.
Yeah. But it just goes to show, though, it's like, well, I had to go to a library and find a UK phone book and kind of look them up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
It was kind of a shot in the dark, but
Well, but don't shot in the darks often work out.
Oh, they do.
Yeah.
It was wonderful. It was really an eye-opening experience.
Yeah.
And going from Canada at the age of 18.
Yeah.
My sister came with me, but it was really exciting. A very exciting time for me.
Not surprised. What a brilliant time to be in London as well. Fantastic. So how long were you there, Cindy?
Just 2 years.
Right.
Just 2 years.
Yeah.
At that time, the apprenticeship was only 2 years.
Right.
And I went home after that.
So once you've done that, have you run an art practice since then, or have you kind of done bits and pieces in between, or worked? Yeah.
Canada wasn't really the place for embroidery.
Right.
So when I came home, I retrained and I became a cartographic technician, something completely different. But then I got the opportunity to get a needlework shop.
Yeah.
And so I did that for a couple of years. And then after that, I did the embroidered textiles BA from Opus School of Textile Arts.
Right.
So it was a correspondence course. And so I got my degree that way.
Cool.
So I've just been immersed in needlework my whole life, really.
So the interest in Tudor embroidery, let's dig around in there. So how did you get interested in the Tudor embroidery? And then, but before you get interested in it, or afterwards, whichever, what makes Tudor embroidery so different looking? Because it does look different, doesn't it? Is it just me? It looks very different from some of the other kind of gold work I see around.
Well, Tudor embroidery encompasses a lot of different techniques.
Right.
And how I got interested in it, we're working on a big project here, and a friend of mine needed to get a whole lot of gold threads. So we went to England, and I stayed with my sister. I found something that the British Museum had just acquired for their collection, which was the Elizabethan Burse. And it's a beautiful big square of velvet covered with gold embroidery. And it was just, I got an opportunity to have a look at it up close, and I was just flabbergasted with the brilliance of the gold and the different kinds of threads. It just overwhelmed me. And I just thought, oh, well, how could they possibly have done that way back in the 1590s?
Yeah.
And I just needed to know more about it. And being gold work was always my favorite technique from school. And I just had to learn more about the people who were doing that kind of work. And that's how that started.
Right. Because it always blows me away. And I've spoken to people before about this. We've got electric light and magnifiers and all sorts of stands and gadgets and everything you could imagine. And can you imagine what it was like trying to do all this beautiful embroidery in 1590? It just blows my head in. It honestly does. I can't imagine it. I just can't.
I can't either, especially considering, the length of the days in England are quite short.
Tell me about it. It's 4 o'clock and it's been dark for half an hour.
Exactly. And you wonder how they could possibly have worked and achieved as much as they did.
Yeah.
And I still don't know. I'm trying to figure it out. And that's part of the puzzle, trying to figure out how they did it and what the conditions were like and all that.
So you've done quite a lot of research, haven't you, Cindy, into this particular topic?
I have, yes. Yeah. It's been a real passion of mine since 2000.
Yeah.
But I only recently started the actual research, documentary research, in at the National Archives and things like that in the past 7 years.
Ah,
but whenever
right.
I go to England, I have to be looking for some answers.
Which brings me into another question here. So your website, your brand is Gutter Lane Embroidery. So when I first came across it, I thought, Gutter Lane, what on earth's all that about? So tell us what Gutter Lane Embroidery is all about then, Cindy.
Well, Gutter Lane is the name of the street where the Embroiderers' Hall was built way back in 1520-ish. And it stood on Gutter Lane until the Second World War, when it was destroyed in the fire in 1666. It was rebuilt and then stayed until the Second World War, when it was destroyed.
Right. So this is in London, yeah. So wow, so that's been there a long time. Yeah, there was so much of London burnt down in the Great Fire, of course, and then the Blitz finished everything else off. So
that's right. Yeah.
Wow.
So I thought I'd just have my own little version over here.
A little Canadian outpost of Gutter Lane.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can all laugh at my Yorkshire accent because we go for gutter. Fabulous. Right then, Cindy. Now, normally I ask about, major inspirations. That's it. We've already talked about your major inspiration there. But maybe you can just highlight when you said about Tudor embroidery as a mixture of different techniques. Is there some key ones that make it quite different from some of the other eras?
Well, the goldwork threads in Tudor times were quite unique compared to the ones they used later in the 1700s,
right?
Or the 1600s, 17th century, 1600s, yeah. And also the way they used them in this particular the particular technique that I really learned a lot about was the one that they used on the Broderers crown, and it was layering silk and metal thread, and it's quite unusual. There's not a lot of those kind of techniques that you can find in museums or anything like that.
Yeah.
So this was a real challenge to work out the way they did it.
Right.
And all the different threads they used and the layering of them. It was a challenge, and it was a lot of fun.
Right. So you've been looking at the artifacts and then kind of reverse engineered it and thought, right, I can see what it looks like. How did they build up those layers? How have they actually done that?
That's right.
Right, because, there isn't an instruction book and a video, is there, from... there isn't a YouTube video from 1590 or whenever it was.
Oh, that would be fabulous. Yeah. I'd love to see that. That would give me all the answers I need.
You need to go back in Doctor Who's TARDIS, don't you, and go back in time, yeah. I find that really interesting because the images that you've shared with me, so there's the crown, and then there's that, I forgot the name of it, it's like going through an ivor needle and then into music, and it's got beautiful flowers on it.
Oh, that's I call that in veneer gaudium.
Right.
It's Latin, and it just means find joy. And this is where I find joy. It's in with my needle and thread. Yeah. And that's just a design I did many years ago. Actually, it was based on the Broderers crown, pictures that I had seen, but I hadn't actually been close to the crown, so I didn't realize how many different techniques there were in there, or different layers of flowers. Mm-hmm. And I just did the design, and then I left it.
Right.
And I think the reason why I left it, it must have been just fate, because when I picked it up to do it after I had done the Broderers crown, it just kind of came together and worked beautifully. Mm. It was a lot of work, but it worked well. Yeah,
because the flowers look really attractive with I don't know if it's the colours of the silk and the kind of gold around it. It's just really, really, really is an effective design now. Very eye-catching. So everyone will have to go and have a look at that, won't they?
And it's fun to do. And it's easy to do, actually. It's a lot of tiny work, a lot of very fine detail.
Yeah.
But very easy stitches.
Right. Yeah. So it's one of those where it's easy stitches, but put together in a complicated looking design.
That's right.
Yeah. So out of those techniques then, there's a whole range here. Is there any particularly that you really, really like doing? You think, ooh, I'm going to build lots of XYZ technique into these designs?
Not really. It's just the metal threads and the silk. Mm. And sometimes I don't really fancy that I'm very good with color. I'm much better with monochromatic work. So the gold work with whatever other color goes with the gold is what I'm most familiar with. And sometimes, like the threaded needle, sometimes the color just works.
Right.
I don't plan anything like that.
Yeah.
It just comes. And when it works, it's great. And when it doesn't, it doesn't work.
I think possibly that's why I like the compass and the I forgot the name again, those, because they're quite monochromatic in some respects, aren't they? It's like a dark background and the gold for the instrument really sets it off. Yeah.
And the fact that they're three-dimensional is just adds a little bit of extra element, a little bit more difficulty as well.
Yeah.
And people like to really challenge themselves.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
So must have been a challenge putting those designs together, was it, Cindy?
Yes, because actually,
she says with English understatement there.
I draw them, and then I try them out.
Yeah.
And then I finish it, and then I see how many things I could do right or do better, and then I do it again. So the compass I did like 4 times.
Right.
Before I settled on the final one.
Yeah.
And the Astrolabe actually came together really well, but I'm going to have to redo it to do instructions if I want to teach it. And the armillary sphere is into its 3rd iteration at the moment.
Right, because that's the other thing that always fascinates me is that whole process of you're developing the design and developing how best to make the design look, as it goes along. And then it's like, okay, now to be able to teach this or make instructions, then you've kind of got to do it again anyway, unless you've been photographing as you're going along, but that might not be the finished version. Do you see? I'm sure you go around in that circle, don't you?
That's exactly what I do all the time.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so therefore, as well, it just shows people who buy kits and courses how much of massive amounts of almost hidden time go into these things.
That's absolutely correct. And then when you add on top of that videos, which are unusual now, or well, they're absolutely usual now, but in the past, you didn't have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And now you do. And then there's also the kits. You have to put the kits together. And that's so time consuming. It's one of the things that I like to do as a break between stitching.
Yes.
It's much more quiet, unproductive, or uncreative thing to do.
Yeah, it gives your brain something else to process, doesn't it? It gives your brain a rest from what you've just been doing, which is not really concentrating. I mean, you still have to concentrate on kits, but it's a different task, isn't it? Your mind can it'll be working away in the background, but you're there concentrating on your kits and things.
You have to measure everything out perfectly, make sure everybody's got exactly the right amount of every one of those funny little metal threads.
Yeah.
And then you shove them into these little baggies and label them all. And it's very relaxing, though.
Yeah, and quite satisfying to finish up with this pile of little bags. Yeah, I'm sure it is.
But what's really very satisfying lately is when I finished and I have these boxes full of envelopes with mailing labels on them.
Yeah.
And then they're going all over the world.
Yeah.
And that's something I never thought would happen either.
Yeah.
And I think it's wonderful that people everywhere can participate, and people are meeting each other over the internet on these classes.
Yeah.
And they're getting to know each other. And so they've got friends all over the world now.
Yeah. And that's the kind of unifying thread that's really come across strongly over the last few months as well, is I think everybody has had their eyes opened more widely as to the power of technology to connect people. I mean, I've been banging on about this since, I started working online in 2010. And, I just, sometimes you feel a bit of a lone voice in the wilderness, and especially in the art community, it's like, oh no, I'm all right doing my local classes and this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And but I think the participants as well have realised that it's actually not difficult to get yourself online, really. And the benefits of doing so are massive. Absolutely massive. Yeah.
They are.
Brilliant. I'm so pleased that's been working out for you, Cindy. Really, that's just, you've highlighted all the really good bits there. Thank you so much. But I was just going to come back in and say, anybody who's kind of going, ooh, that seems a bit dear, just look at the amount of work from a business perspective as well as an artistic perspective that goes into creating these unique, interesting pieces. So anyway.
Right. Yes, thank you, Sue.
Yeah. Right then. What would you say then, Cindy, has been the high point of this kind of very interesting and varied embroidery career so far?
That's a really good question. There's been a lot of high points. When I got my degree, that was a high point. Yeah. I didn't think that would ever be possible. That's something that I had dreamed of since I was in high school. Here we have, when you do a high school graduation book, you do what was your nickname? What was your asset? What was your this? And what is your ambition? And my ambition was to get a degree in needlework.
And I bet everybody laughed their head off, didn't they? I bet they're all going, what the heck are you on about? Degree in needlework? No, it's a daft.
Yeah. And I did. I achieved that 30 years later, but I did. And so that was pretty good. Yeah. And then right after that, I was invited to take part in the designer crafts show and sale at the mall galleries. And because I was a new student, I was invited, and my piece won an award there. So that was pretty exciting as well. Yeah. I didn't expect that. Yeah. Oh, I've managed to get some pretty good research awards as well, which are very good. So I think the main highlight there would be the Janet Arnold Award, because it gave me the opportunity to do the reproduction of the Broderers crown. Those kind of high points.
Yeah, there really are high points, those as well. It's really nice to do these things because we're interested in, and to get external validation and recognition really kind of adds the glittery bits to it all, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. It kind of just makes the effort really worthwhile.
Yeah, and so satisfying. Brilliant. Yeah. And so then we always have a bit of a laugh about, we've had all these lovely highlights and all this gorgeous sparkly work. Do you have any amusing stories of disasters or something that didn't quite go as planned? And really importantly, Cindy, what did you learn from that episode?
Yes, I have one that comes to mind. I never taught a lot on a regular basis, but when I did, it was usually, I used to have to pack everything up and travel on a plane to the States or to far-flung areas in Canada. Yeah. And this particular time, I was doing a course in San Francisco. Yeah. I had previously done a course in the States and had been with someone who lost their luggage. Mm-hmm. So I knew I shouldn't put my kits in the luggage because they might show up when I got there. So I carried them onto the plane. But what I didn't realize was they were going to X-ray all my kits. And in my kits, I had these little, they were 2-inch bolts, kind of like for IKEA, when you put your IKEA things together. Oh, yeah. Big bolts. And it was for crimping the plate. I don't know if you know what that is, but if anybody's listening, I crimp the plate by putting it into the threads of the screw. And so I had one of those in each one of the kits. Right. And the customs officer made me take them all out with all the kits. So I took out all the big screws and leave them there. And then when I got to San Francisco, I thought, what am I going to do? I don't have part of my kit. So the first thing I did was I went to the concierge at the hotel, and I said, because it was right downtown, and I was thinking all these huge, great big buildings around me, there's not going to be any kind of a hardware store. I'm going to have to go out to the boonies to find a big box store. But the concierge said, "Oh yes, I think there's one right across the street."
No, never.
It was right across the street, and I walked right past it the first time because it was just all these big buildings, and there was this door that you went in, and then you went down the stairs, and it opened up into this dark, very, very old, really traditional hardware store with all the little bins and everything. Yeah, and I think it had been there since the gold rush. Yeah, and it was and they had exactly what I needed. Oh, brilliant. I was so fortunate, but. What I learned was, number one, you don't argue with the customs officer because they're always right. Yes. And number two is don't panic. it'll all come right in the end.
Well, that is
Yep.
so true. Yeah, it really is.
So that's my little story.
Oh, brilliant. I thought you were going to say you'd had your scissors confiscated, because obviously these days you can't travel with scissors or all this sort of thing, so.
I did have my scissors confiscated, but it wasn't on a needlework trip. They were manicure scissors.
Yeah.
They were teeny tiny things, and they just took them right away.
Yeah. I remember out somewhere, it wasn't metal things, but I'd had when they went through the you can't travel with liquids thing, I'd come over to England when I was living in France. I'd come over to England for a new batch of contact lenses and the solutions, and so had these about 3 or 4 these big bottles of solutions, and totally forgot about and I only had hand luggage with me, and I was just in tears as the customs person. I said, but they're sealed, it's contact lens stuff, they're still, and I was crying and begging him. He said no, and it cost me a fortune as well, because I'd like stockpiled all this stuff. I was like, I was just stood there in absolute tears, and I think, I can't wear my contact lenses now because I've got no solutions. I was like,
that must have happened to so many people.
I know, I was just gutted, really was. What about then, Cindy? Do you have any of those dreaded UFOs lurking around in the back of a cupboard or a bag somewhere? And if so, do you have some that have been going on for a long time? Or are you a good girl and finish everything off?
I have half of my basement is in studio, and the other half is still this very dark, dim area that's just full of boxes and things. But the UFOs that I have aren't really UFOs. They're experiments mostly.
Right. Oh, that's a good way of calling them.
Yeah, I just keep hold of them. And if I'm ever in need of inspiration, I'll go through them for something new.
That's a good idea. Yeah. Go back through for inspiration. And what do you think? Oh, can I do something better? Or can I, what inspires you about them?
Well, that's, the experimental nature of them. And if I had dismissed it for the particular project I was working on, it might be useful now for something completely different. Not the same piece of work, but the technique that I was experimenting with.
Right.
I used to do a lot of machine embroidery as well.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of those pieces down there. But the thing that I have that I really haven't finished, but I really do want to finish eventually, is a mother's tree sampler, which I started many, many years ago. And it's like a genealogy tree.
All right.
Only it goes back through the female line.
Right.
And I started that many years ago, and I had many generations of my grandmothers and my great all the way back to the 1700s, which is pretty good for Canada.
That's exceptional, because especially as you say for Canada, even over here, you get to a point where you get back to the church records are on in Latin, and you can't read, nobody can head and tail of them anymore. And a lot of people grind to a halt at that point as well. So, wow, that's exceptional. Oh yeah, you've got to finish that.
Yeah. So it's a surface embroidery one. So it's something different. It's got ribbon work and a little bit of stump work and things like that in it. But I would have to dig it out of that very dark,
out of the graveyard down at the next to the studio.
I call it the dungeon.
The dungeon, yeah. Very, very medieval. That, yes. Right, Cindy. So here we go. I just, I'm going to stop saying I can't believe how fast our time together has gone. But as we just kind of wrap up, future plans. I know you said you've got a couple of new classes coming along. So, what are your future plans, as much as anybody can plan at the moment? Have you got anything to share with us? And, what are you looking forward to?
Well, there was a conference that I was just heading out to in April in England when everything shut down. Mm-hmm. So I still have that ticket. I'm supposed to use it. I have a voucher for it now.
Yeah. And
I will use it as soon as I can, because I love going back and looking at all the old embroideries and the research. And so I will do that as soon as I can. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking forward to that.
That's something to look forward to, isn't it? Definitely. Yes. Yeah.
And I have a course that I'm working on now that I started in the fall with a fellow teacher who you had her on a while ago, Natalie Dupuis.
Ah, yes, Natalie. Yeah.
Yeah. She has been helping me put together a proper class with readings and and samples and things like that.
Yeah.
She's really good with planning a curriculum.
Mm-hmm. She has got a teaching background, hasn't she? Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So the course is going to be on Tudor Embroidery. That's going to be an introduction to Tudor Embroidery, and it will cover from 1485 all the way up to 1603. And it will follow the development of embroidery through that period.
Mm-hmm.
There was the Reformation and all the ecclesiastical embroidery that professional embroiderers had been doing. So that kind of they didn't do that anymore. So they had to kind of find something else to embroider. And luckily, that was when embroidery for fashion started to become
fashionable.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and it just went on from there. So there'll be lots of different samples and lots of readings, lots to learn about embroiderers, the people who actually did the embroidery, and the embroiderers, what they call the Broderers company.
Yeah.
It's fascinating stuff. And I'm hoping that I can put it together so that people will learn the history as well as the stitching.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, I think quite often with these traditional techniques, really the two go hand in hand. And I think if you can put your head into how things were done in those days as well, I think it just adds a richer experience to it. Or is that just me because I like the nitty-gritty details of things?
No, I think that's absolutely correct. I think if you can add the people element as well as the stitching element, it really comes to life. Comes to life, yeah.
Fabulous. Well, there we are. I think on that note of bringing embroidery to life, I think we're all rooting for that. And everybody's really kind of pushing to keep embroidery not just alive, but thriving. And I think, as much as this year's been a challenge, I see a great deal of scope for things to grow even bigger and get more and more people involved. Definitely. That's my take on everything.
I think you're absolutely right. And I'm working my hardest to get it that way.
I think we all are, Cindy. I think we all are in our different ways.
Yes.
Oh, it's been fabulous speaking to you. As ever, we could chat on all day. So everybody, make sure you go and check out Cindy's website. Go and find her on Facebook. As I say, with some of these pieces that we've been talking about, you'll see on Cindy's episode of Stitchery Stories, and I'll also be sharing them as usual on Instagram as well. And there we are. Cindy, thank you so much for sharing what a brilliant, brilliant story about Tudor embroidery and your story as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sue. It's been great to be with you.
Oh, it's been brilliant. If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more, then please join the Stitchery Stories fan club so you can get an email when a new episode is released. It's a quick and easy way of listening and of keeping up with any news and information around this podcast. Please visit stitcherystories.com. Of course, you can listen to Stitchery Stories on plenty of podcast apps at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and plenty more besides. You can also ask your smart speaker to play Stitchery Stories podcast too. But wherever you listen, why not leave us a rating and a review to encourage other people to listen too? I very much appreciate you taking the time to do that for me. So that is the end of our Stitchery story for today. Keep stitching, keep smiling, and keep creating your very own Stitchery Stories.